Hey everybody, we got Joe Stoddard on today. Hi Joe.
Hello, Chuck.
Why don't you tell us about your career? Just start from the beginning and just tell us what you've been up to for a long time now.
For 40 or 50 years.
Yeah.
Well, um, I kind of grew up in the sawdust. I mean, it was one of my various family enterprises. Um,
You grew up where?
I grew up I grew up in sawdust. You know, my uncle was a uh, a factory carpenter. You know, for Elton Leather Company, which is the town I grew up in, and my dad was always doing mechanical drawings for different people and stuff, and so we always had projects going on as a kid. So long story short, as soon as we got out of college, I, I was actually doing uh, working as a laborer all through junior high. Before I had my driver's license, I started working on job sites with different contractors locally and stuff, and just uh, always loved it. Went to college. I was trying to get into veterinary school. I was actually a biology major and a business
Hmm.
minor. And long story short, that didn't pan out. So started I started right back in remodeling and building houses while I was in college. And one thing led to another, right? So I was your basic small volume builder. And this is where the story gets strange because uh, my wife's stepdad, actually uh, yeah, her stepfather, uh, who is now the code enforcement officer here, uh, was a computer guy, and uh, he traded in a six-figure data center programming job in the late 70s, early 80s, somewhere around 1980, right? Whenever the IBM XT came out, right along that timeline. So
82,
80.
83. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, anyway, he uh, he developed a point of sale system, and he was one of the first guys I ever saw or heard of using clones, right? Because the Chinese clones had already shown up. Um, And so he was selling these hardware software packages to small business. I traded him a rubber roof on his commercial building. And he was another guy, he was a lot like my family. And by the way, he was only 8 years older than me, and that's a long story in itself. But he was quite a lot younger than my wife's mom, and second marriage for both of them. So Um, and it seemed like a lot at the time, but she was 40 and he was 27 when they got married.
Wow.
It'd be either of those ages again, right? Would be great. But anyway, he had a motorcycle shop too. So he was a computer we call it TSL, Tracy Leasing and Sales. Back then, you leased PC systems, right? Um, So anyway, long story short, I traded him a roof on his bike shop for my first computer system, and this was in the early '80s. I'd been building a few years, but we computerized in the early '80s, and I think I sent you a rundown of what all that entailed.
Yeah.
Uh, it was an XT clone and various software, some of it pirated, including a copy of AutoCAD 1.0. Copy of VisiCalc, which I might have been Lotus 123 at that point, and WordPerfect, and and some accounting package. He was also a CA, Computer Associates dealer, so whatever their accounting package was at the time. That was my first setup in a single print plotter and a dot matrix printer. Uh, Traded for a $20,000, and that would be in 1980-ish dollars, rubber roof.
Yeah.
So we were the first, I think probably the first builder in the area to have any kind of technology. And, one thing led to another, and word got out that, we had done that. And so very early on, I guess I didn't realize it was a consulting career at the time because I was still building, and I
How many
continued to go,
homes were you building back then a year?
10 to 20 maybe,
Yeah.
something like that, small volume. But he and I also built swimming pools in the
Mm.
summer.
In the summer.
Job. And we had a remodeling wing too. We did a lot of remodeling as well, Uh, but yeah, I'd say, probably 20 projects, 20 homes a year, something like that. Uh, Enough that it was too many to do as a one-off. And I quickly learned that, and I had a couple partners in that as well. But I learned that, hey, we gotta somehow systematize this. And so that's what kind of drove me in that direction. And we went from being a completely custom builder to a portfolio builder where we were building in communities and all that sort of thing. But we continue to do on your lot in a it's a very rural area, so very spread out jobs all over uh, twin tiers of New York and Pennsylvania. But anyway, uh, I continued to do that to the mid 90s. But little by little, I was getting, stuck down the, hey, we bought a computer. What do we do with it? Road. And one day I got a call from Craig Savage at the Journal of Light Construction. He was one of the editors there, and he was also the editor of Construction Business Computing newsletter at the time. And long story short, I started a relationship with that magazine.
Yeah.
And that, you know, that set me up as sort of the national stage. I started writing for JLC on uh, business issues. And at first, I mean, I was just editing and ghosting. And then, I don't know, in the late 90s, I finally started getting a byline. And, by that point, I was completely out of the building business and transitioned completely into consulting.
When you were
And
in the building business and you had the computer, what kind of software did you use? Do you remember the name of the software, or like did you have an ERP package, a full accounting and all that?
we didn't use it wasn't an ERP package at the time. I mean, we used I'm going to say it was something like DAC Easiest, whatever Computer Associates uh, as one of those early PC packages. It was DOS 5.
And
Uh,
Computer Associates, of course, they weren't home builder specific, right?
oh no, not at all. But we at that point in time, we're talking the early '80s. I didn't realize there was any home builder specific. That's something that I learned, started to get into a few years later, as I started to survey the marketplace for the various companies I was consulting with. And, one thing led to another. And I ended up editing Construction Business Computing, taking over Craig's newsletter. And that's when I really, in the late 90s, we're ahead now to the late 90s. And that's when I really started to get involved with the builder ERP packages and things like that, bigger software, bigger companies that I was dealing with, multi-hundred home builders, production, more production oriented stuff and et cetera. And one of our prime consulting products at that point was software evaluation for uh, for home builders. And I quickly found out that uh, corporate readiness was a big issue, company readiness to adopt any kind of technology. I mean, because builders are always way behind. You think, okay, hey, 1995, the internet's coming on. Well, no, I mean, these companies were just starting to get PCs at that point. Uh, you know, 10 years behind the commercial side of the industry, most of residential. So sorting all that out, and helping companies get ready operationally so they could adopt technology, successfully, was a big part of my consulting at that point. So,
Did you find there were certain packages that you really like to work with, and did you actually help the builders to implement those softwares?
yeah, I mean, I didn't always help to implement, but quite often we would stay involved through an implementation. One of the problems, you worked for Fast, right?
Yeah,
Fast was one of the few contenders at that time, late 80s, early 90s, where you actually had a pro services department and actually had a legitimate, some kind of an implementation plan,
right,
a
right. We had
project. And that was unusual. I mean, most of your competition on the residential side were clueless along those lines. And I don't know, who would you say you were competing with? That's the Tom system, right?
we were
Uh,
competing with McCosker and
Picasso, yeah,
the Mark system, which is still out there.
yeah,
Um, and well, we were sort of competing with the Tom system. Chris Maxwell was obviously
right,
really heavily promoting that package and had ended up buying it from Tom and running it. So we were competing against that one,
yeah.
which I actually wrote in the late 70s.
Um, right, but the other stuff that was out there, construction software. This is the other thing I learned very early on is that the bulk of the software, the ERP type packages for the construction industry were really a poor fit for home builders. Very poor fit for one
Yeah,
reason or another. I mean, what we do is so different. We're dealing with repetition, redundancy, same model and option packages over and over and over.
yep.
That's not typically the case, for a GC.
No, not at all. Yeah.
Ma-
Every
ma-
job's custom.
Right. And so just as an example, just the ability to assemble what I call a set of purchase orders that represent a house,
Right.
right? Start to finish. Well, hey, you couldn't do it. When 90% of the software that was out there, it's a one-off deal. Even packages, for instance, Omware's package called Master Builder, right?
Yeah.
Widely adopted by small volume home builders, and really not the greatest fit because of that. So there was a lot of square pegs and round holes trying to be produced. But yeah, you guys, Tom, the Mark system, they're Lloyd, True Line. There were a few others. Um,
And Trueline is actually just the McCosker system rebranded.
yeah, and no, what was the other one there? Came a little new stuff a little later on. But anyway, what I learned very quickly was what the companies were adopting didn't matter as much as their ability to adopt it and change management and just getting the organization ready for that kind of a change, going from minimal to no technology to okay, we're going to A, systematize and B, automate it. And that again, two separate issues, right? Uh, but anyway, that so I continued doing that. And I met up with Bob Whitten in the early 2000s and Steve Maltzman, and worked with SMA. And along the way, I'm kind of leaving pieces out because along the way, ran into several builders that were, on the same track, trying to develop products, get them to market, etc. So that was another thing that I had a hand in. Uh, Various products, some made it, some didn't, but very unrealistic expectations from a builder thinking they were going to develop something that would uh, flow into the general builder marketplace and be adopted. And I mean that continues to this day.
Oh, you're
Uh,
talking about builders who write their own in-house package and then take it out to sell it to other builders.
exactly. Try to sell it commercially to a wide builder population.
Do you remember BuildSoft?
Oh yeah, very well, of course. Keith Brown. Uh, BuildSoft was probably one of the biggest, small builder, uh, small builder packages that actually did purchasing, the way you would expect a package to, and things like that in the early '90s. And here's the wild thing. I remember I was at the NHB show. I think it was '94 or '5. The public internet was just starting to be a thing, and there was a sign for BuildNet up in the BuildSoft booth. And so you remember that whole thing, the
Yeah.
BuildNet.
It's
Right.
hard to forget since I merged fast in with BuildNet.
Well, the whole so by that time I was writing for the various Hanley would purchase JLC again. This is for the second time around
Wait,
1999 or
JLC, clarify, JLC?
Journal of Light Construction.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And so I was writing for JLC, and I was covering and working in trade shows like AEC Systems. We produced a residential track in AEC Systems for a few years, and uh, we were developing our own trade show called JLC Live, which is still out there. And I developed a sort of a residential technology pavilion, kind of showing off the latest builder technology for that trade show. And so anyway, all these things got me under the hood at a lot of software developers over the years, and meeting people and figuring out, what what markets they were trying to address, and so on and so forth. I attended Microsoft partner meetings in New York for a while. Microsoft was in and out of residential. They stick their toe in and then take it out. But it was a really interesting time, rolling up to the first .com boom, right?
Right.
And nobody at that point had a clue what the internet was going to be, or how it's going to impact everything. And I mean, everyone was flying by the seat of their pants, trying to get technology, A, online at all, and then B, the whole idea of things actually, executables running in the cloud and that sort of thing. Again, in residential, we were 10 years behind the rest of the industry. I mean, commercial, I was working with AEC Systems, and the technology that I would see there, was 10 years ahead of what we were using on the residential side. So, and they were much quicker to adapt to the internet because I think because owners of those big commercial projects demanded it. You know, they wanted the visibility of the project. They were willing to spend the dollars for the connectivity. You know, all those things.
Yeah, and their
Where,
margins were so thin they had to maximize efficiency or
right.
just go out of business.
Oh yeah, I mean, you're talking about single digit net margins, and and for some of those
Yeah.
disciplines. Yeah, for sure. But it took home builders a long time, and still not, still behind. But then of course we so continued down that road until the crash, right? 2006, 7, 8, along in there, and that really, it took a lot of the the products that we would short list uh, to builders either off the table altogether or the Constellation or Sage, or there's a lot of aggregation going on at that point, and not very much new coming into the marketplace. And so that whole side of the in terms of consulting, that whole side kind of fell off for me at that point. Uh, like today, there's only there's more new things coming into the marketplace today. But for several years there were only a handful of things that we could even shortlist to a builder, because they either weren't under active development, or they were there and still viable. Fast being one. Constellation had Fast and a bunch of other titles, uh, which was great. I mean, if they hadn't done that, those companies would have been out of business entirely. But Buildtopia and some of the other early web-based stuff that was out there, it would have died on the vine. But at the same time, if you're making a recommendation to a company to invest significant dollars in time and energy on technology, are you going to shortlist something where you don't know if there's a future for that product? So, it ended up being okay, the Mark system, right, still going forward, and a couple of others. But hey, we used to have a dozen packages that we would highlight in an analysis report, and shortlist two or three, and put together, help a builder put together an implementation plan, uh, so on and so forth. Uh, and that, the '08 crash, I mean, that took that to just a handful, right? So not really viable, as a consulting product.
So you're doing consulting as well now, right?
Yep, I still work with Bob Whitten at SMA, and you know, much more on the operational side, and construction oriented, quality assurance, trade knowledge code, and we've transitioned a lot. I mean, SME in general has transitioned more into a training company than a purely a consultancy. So we've put more effort in that. We still do scorecards. I would still go do a technology evaluation for a company if somebody wanted it. It was just uh, that whole environment has changed so much. For one thing, um, because of the cloud, it's much easier for companies to adopt technology at any level
Yeah,
today. It's
right.
just much easier. Uh, we're not talking about on-premise servers. We don't have any of those issues, or very few of them. The last server I installed at a builder was in 2005, and we wouldn't have had to do that, like, other than the builder, who was oddly they were adopting Buildtopia, but they insisted on using, I don't know, I think it was Timberline accounting, or or Sage 300, I guess now,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And insisted on doing an on-premise uh, accounting situation. They could have just as easily had done something web-based as well, or at least cloud-based.
Right.
Uh, but anyway, that was the last network server I installed. So that's 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Hard to-
It's getting really nice. Everything in the cloud and the servers kind of take care of themselves in some sense.
They do, but here's the thing: builders forget that they still have. I mean, they still have tremendous security issues, and they don't take care of their local network because they don't think they have to, right? So it's like, oh yeah, we'll set up a Wi-Fi setup, and everybody will connect to that and connect to all our cloud software. Well, that's great, except they're wide open to all kinds of security issues. I mean, we've had half a dozen clients in the last few years hit with ransomware.
Oh boy.
Here's an example. Yeah, and just as one example, we had another client that got scammed in an ACH scam, and large amounts of money extracted from their bank accounts and sent to Romania. And they thought they were safe, working, in the cloud. So yeah, you still got to take care of your local network, but it is much easier than dealing with all that stuff on premise. There's no question about it. And so it's not anywhere near the consulting, um, nowhere near the need for consulting that there was in those areas. I guess if that makes any sense.
Yeah, because I used to go into builders' offices and they always had, a room with the servers in it,
Sure.
with locked door and air conditioning and,
Oh yeah,
super
we set
AC.
a lot of those up. You
Huh?
know that you know Bob used to make fun of me because, like, I had a big section of a report where we talked about cable management.
Right.
And he and Steve Malton would give me a hard time. It's like, well, hey, if they're going to do it, they need, this is the right way to do it. We're a best practice firm, so we're not going to tell them to do it, do it the wrong way. But yeah, a lot of that's been eliminated. I mean, Journal of Light Construction, their first web server, when that magazine, their first website, went online, I literally built the web server on my kitchen table, and I drove it to Sterling, Virginia, and installed it. And it was Exodus at the time data center. They were just starting to build all those massive data centers in northern Virginia,
Yeah.
and it was mind blowing. We'd never seen anything like that, right? And the amount of build out that was going on there at that time. Uh, but yeah, so that was the magazine's first website, and I literally built the web server on my kitchen table and drove it and bolted it into a rack. Uh, yeah, it's been a very interesting ride, and then the 2000s, early 2000s, we looked at so many web-based products, cloud-based products, where the developers had no clue whatsoever how the industry worked. They were just they were funded by venture capital, came into the scene having never set foot on any kind of job site, commercial or residential. Right? I mean, we reviewed products where they literally didn't realize that you had to include like address fields or subtrades as an example. Right? It's like, well, where do I put the company address? Well, we don't have a place for that. Just the name. It's like, well, okay, that doesn't make any sense. But uh, so and then there were no standards either, right? As far as running stuff in the cloud, executables in the cloud, everybody was writing stuff from scratch. we're now we have frameworks and platforms, and it's much easier to tap into all that too, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah, for
then
sure.
everybody is writing their own libraries and their own executables, and there were no standards in terms of you know how it's going to generate HTML to a browser and on and on and on. And the Mark system, I think one of the first I would call it cross-platform products, right? Because they transitioned to a Java approach along about that time. They still use that, uh, but they were one of the first to really, I think, kind of get that right and really transition uh, kind of successfully to the web. Um, but yeah, and so where I was going with that. So here we are today, 2025. So I've gone from 1985 to 2025, and we're right back here flying by the seat of our pants again with AI, artificial intelligence. Uh, it's the same thing all over again. We see all these, we see demonstrations, we see proposals, we see all these products that look like they're going to come to market and do this, that, or the other. I think it's going to happen much more quickly than the web in general did, right?
Yeah,
Right now, I mean, nobody knows what's going on, and it's going to take a year, I don't know, a couple of years to shake out. But it just reminds me very much of the early mid '90s, when the internet was first starting to come into play, and I feel like we're right back there,
yeah, because we didn't know what to do with it.
right? And I still don't know what to do with AI. I mean, hey, I don't need AI to write an article for me personally. I don't. I find it to be somewhat useful if I'm going to do an Excel function or something like that. But even then, um, I was listening to a guy's podcast today. He was comparing the 4 or 5 large language models that are out there. The big ones, Google's and OpenAI, and Clyde. I forget who has that, or Claude.
Claude, Anthropic Claude, and of course Grok.
Yeah. Uh, he was trying to compare and contrast those, and I've played with all of them, but I don't think I mean, the problem is where are we going to get the data for this industry that these models are going to parse? I mean, you're going to have to get down in it to get for it to really be substantive for the industry. You're going to have to get under the hood, right? Of real estate data is out there, land data is out there, but what about construction data? How are you going to aggregate all this stuff when everybody's using all these different ERP packages, and there's a lot of shakeout that's got to happen, for it to be impactful, say the way it is for medical, or the legal industry, or other types of concerns like that. Uh, we just don't have access to the data. It's too fragmented, and everything is in silos in individual companies.
Yeah,
You know, so I don't know. It's going to be interesting to watch how it shakes out. But there's a lot of false promises being made, a lot of hopes. But here's the thing: we're right back to, if you're evaluating software right now, like Builder MT, right? Everyone got their notice, I don't know, 6 months or a year ago, that okay, we are officially shuttering this product. And a lot of our clientele has been using Builder MT, for a number of years. And uh, is it the greatest ERP platform? No, but I mean, they got pretty good traction and several hundred builders using it, right? Uh,
yeah,
that are all going to be out of luck. Come this time next year, they're going to all be out of luck. So right now, there's a lot of these companies that are scrambling to move off Builder MT and find something else to use. And we've had several just in the last year transition. Some went to Mark, some went to Fred Cores, one of the newer ones, um, Hyphen, But are any of those products that are out there now, the current crop, Mark, Hyphen, Thread Core, yeah, whatever, yada, 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 are any of them really gearing up to address whatever's going to be happening with AI and actually integrate that into their product line? And I think the products that are going to show up are going to be just maybe a completely new set of maybe an entirely new approach to software, right?
Yeah,
Maybe something more. Are you familiar with Hierarch? Have you seen their stuff?
I haven't. No. Hi, Arc.
Hierarch, yeah, Highgarc. Uh, it's it's AI ish machine automation, uh, purchasing and drafting, right? And the guy that developed it did not come from the building industry. He came from aerospace. So he's not thinking in terms of wall assemblies and so on and so forth, building components. But they, they're automating the whole plan and drawn per contract process, right? And churning out, pretty good working drawings with a couple of mouse clicks. And it's getting better all the time, but they've got some pretty solid investors behind them. Home Depot's got money in that, um, et cetera, et cetera. So there are some things like that
Do
that are
they do
not,
things like calculate loads on load-bearing beams and things like that?
well, they don't currently, but they certainly could,
All
right?
right.
They certainly could. What they're trying to do now, they're walking a thin line. Like, okay, how much data do we expose? And you'll need to talk to them about that. But their platform could certainly do that. But they're trying to play nice with other software that's in the marketplace. I told them flat out, yeah, you should do that. You should do the basic engineering, and you should generate the purchase orders directly out of your product, because they could also do that quite easily. But they don't want to do that because they don't want to alienate whoever's out there on Mark, on Threadcore, on whatever
Yeah,
else.
I think they're much better off just transferring quantities to the ERP, and the ERP will already have vendor bids and pricing, and then it generates the PO. So that's the most, to me, that's the most logical thing. And we did that in the 90s
Oh yeah.
with that CAD system from Finland. Uh,
Oh, ArchiCAD.
no, it wasn't ArchiCAD. I can't remember the name of it now, but it was a pretty impressive CAD system that would let you do walkthroughs of the house visually.
Oh,
And then as you're walking through, you have a wall and you click on it, you right click, add door, and you select a door, and then it immediately puts the door right there and changes the whole everything.
doing that in the 90s.
And then yeah, in the 90s, and then you can open the door and walk through it now that you have it.
Yeah. Well, all of those integrations, it's like Kova, right? Kova is one that was going down that road. All of those intensive integrations that you have to do, the problem is, you got to keep it running on all sides, right? And if one vendor changes anything about their software, then vendor B has to update, and someone has to come in and keep the whole thing running. So if you've got an IT operation that can do that, that's great, right? But if you don't, you end up with a lot of problems. And that was a big problem with Builder MT. There were so many executables that had to all talk to each other and work together. you know, it's great when it all works. The question is the builder big enough to staff up and have the expertise, either in-house or hired,
Yeah.
to keep
Yep.
all that running? And are they doing enough business to justify it? You
Yeah,
can't
that's
remember.
right. You
Can you
ultimately
remember?
want the software vendors to basically maintain that. The software vendors maintain the relationships with their sort of like interface buddies.
Until they don't. And that's been the problem with Microsoft, right? Microsoft and Intuit, there's two good examples. Uh, they'll issue an API, Intuit will issue an API. Okay, here's what you can access in the QuickBooks products. Okay, so you got Builder Trend or somebody like that, and they come along and they build an accounting book to QuickBooks Online or QuickBooks Desktop, whatever. And there's been half a dozen of these, right? Well, then somebody into it decides, well, we're going to close a piece of this API off, or we're going to change it, and then poof, anything on the other side breaks. Microsoft is notorious for that.
Yeah, I know I got burned by them on that one.
Yeah, I mean, and everybody, everybody,
I was
everybody's been
calling an interface. I was calling an interface to SharePoint, and we had the interface programmed and everything was working. And literally in the middle of the day, Microsoft changed the interface and broke our customers who were running live
yeah,
in real time.
yeah,
And
with no notice and no
nothing.
apology.
Just,
Yeah.
all of a sudden it's not working. And the customer's like, why is it not working? And then we figure it out eventually.
Oh, see, that was I got it. I mean, I had people pounding crosses in the ground, getting ready to nail me on them and light them on fire.
And I mean,
Uh,
we are located in Redmond, so we just literally drive across the road to get to Microsoft. So that was
yeah.
kind of
Well,
convenient.
they would spend, so I was working with a guy. This was a very, small builder firm called BuildWorks. It was just an interface, sort of middleware between Microsoft Office and QuickBooks. And it was pretty cool. I mean, he had it set up. He had a bunch of templates and stuff set up so you could generate purchase orders and send them over to QuickBooks, and all the stuff a small volume, because he was a small volume builder. He's one of these guys that was building and developed this for his own business and was using it. And he had pretty good traction with this because it wasn't very expensive, and it used Office and QuickBooks, right?
Yeah.
But it was a constant battle with Intuit, to keep that working. But I would attend the Microsoft partner meetings in New York on his behalf, and Microsoft would send in a VP of whatever to address the group, and you'd have a guy in there, and it's like, well, here's our plans for the construction industry for the next 6 months. Yeah, and then you go through it. Well, the next meeting, a month later, that guy would be gone, and somebody else would be there, and that whole plan would have changed. Maybe not in a month, but within 3 months or six, that whole plan would have changed. And well, we've kind of shelved that. And these were all third-party developers that were looking for ways to reach, not just our industry, but multiple industries, right? The partner group. But a lot of them were looking at the construction side, and I mean, Microsoft just never really got it together. I mean, they acquired Great Plains and some other stuff, and they had
Solomon.
but
Yeah.
we started a lot with. I mean, we had a couple developers working on solutions using SharePoint as kind of the framework. It made perfect sense, right? All the parts were there, everything you need, right?
And then they
Uh,
changed the entire interface the next day.
Right. Well, and then that's the thing. They didn't understand how to work with. And I think, Chuck, the residential side of the construction industry is so niche. Right? We're a fly speck of a fly speck.
Right.
So yeah, you can't remember the CAD program that you guys were trying to interface with, the name of it?
I'm having a hard time remembering the name. I know that it was based out of Finland, a Finnish
Finland.
company. Um, and yeah, it was just some sort of ArchiCAD, not ArchiCAD, but some name like that. You
Okay.
know, just some name with the word CAD in it somewhere.
Or there was one called Architect, like TEK, something like that, and that was European. Um, the problem with all those, ArchiCAD also, I mean, coming out of Europe, they're just enough different that their approach is a little foreign to U.S. users, right? And so you have to make a lot of concessions. Um, Nemetschek, Vectorworks, kind of the same
Yeah. We had a
kind of,
working interface with this program, and all they would do was basically export the quantity takeoffs from the CAD program into a specific home on a specific lot with a specific plan already selected.
yeah.
And what it would do was update all the quantities so
And this
that
is fast.
yeah, yeah, it would import them in the fast, and that would give you the exact quantities for that exact house with all of its options and everything included. Um, and we had it working for a company called Falling Water out of Atlanta.
Okay, cool. Well, there's been a lot of attempts at that over the decades, right? But take a look at high art because I think that's the real evolution of that kind of approach.
Yeah,
Um,
I'll check it out.
but I think we're gonna see even this stuff. I think it's gonna go into the shadows if they're not running full speed ahead. I've seen some estimating programs now. They're not they're not even in public beta yet. But where some guys have taken, the AI approach, right, and really doing some spectacular stuff on the estimating and purchasing side. Like being able to load in PDFs of the plan, not even necessarily construction drawings, but the AI being able to do stuff like, where you've got a notch out on a plan and you can't see behind a dormer in a particular view or something like that, where a human really has to know, okay, there's a dormer there and there's something on the other side of it that's not shown in any of these elevations, right? One of
Right.
those things. And hold on just a second. I'm sorry. Bob Whitten calling me. About dental surgery today. I don't know why, uh, but anyway, this AI generated estimating package did a perfect job at finding those kind of places that would take human intelligence right now to do. And they're not quite ready to release yet. And I'm kind of I can't really talk about it very much. But it's going to be impressive when it releases. And I think that they're one of many that are going to be out there. I also think the whole approach to so-called ERP, if AI ends up being deployed in our industry the way it could be, I think it might make every traditional approach to software that's out there today pretty much obsolete. And so we'll just have to see what happens. But I don't think it's going to take 10 years. I think it'll
No,
take, I think
no.
it's going to take a couple, 3 years, and we'll see it's going to be a lot faster than the web was, I think, and between that and mobile technology, you know, younger builders and younger people just in general, they don't even want to, they just want to deal with their phones. I mean,
Yeah.
they don't want to deal with anything beyond a mobile device. Um, unless they're forced to for some reason. So, there's that whole side of it too.
Yeah,
But
we did our first mobile for superintendents in 1995
yeah,
with
I work with a company called Field to Base. Do you remember them?
Yeah, I kind of do. It's weird because I hadn't thought about that in
Yeah, that was a
forever.
that was a super cool product because it was, back then, connectivity was a huge
Argos. Argos. That's the name of that CAD company. Argos.
yeah, Vertex. Yeah, very familiar with that CAD package. The only problem with Argos is, 15 grand a seat or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So
That's expensive.
yeah, but I've used SoftPlan and Chief Architect since the early '90s when they were both in DOS, and SoftPlan for a typical home builder, you can get a very accurate takeoff and push it into you gotta push it through a CSV file or some kind of intermediary, right?
Right.
But you can pick it up in any of the typical estimating, budgeting side of an ERP package and push it into POs. I've done that engagement a few times. The problem is you gotta be willing to draw in SoftPlan or in Chief or in whatever in Argos. You've got to be willing to draw objects and not just try to shortcut it with lines. It's not
Right.
going to count. It's not going to count the cabinets if you just draw a line and put cabinets, right? You have to actually put all those things in, and that's where it gets really tedious because builders don't want to do that up front. They don't want to expend that effort up front because you have to do it up front. Um,
I
so that's
recall Argos had a library of doors and windows and
oh yeah.
it all came with it.
Yeah, SoftPlan does, Chief does. I mean, they all do now, right? No,
Yeah.
Arc is very, I'll tell you who's using Argos. Burke's Homes in around Allentown.
Burks or Brooks.
Burke's, Burke's. It was Burke's Firefly. One of our SMA partners uh, partner with that guy. He's back out on his own now again. Mike Benshaw. But yeah, they were running Argos.
Cool.
I saw that package the first time I was at AIBD convention. Really, really early maybe 1990, 91, something like that.
Right.
It's impressive, no, and it still is. The problem is they've got a
Yeah.
tiny user base, and there were a couple other ones too along, but everyone's trying to do that. Uh, Today, a lot of builders are trying to shift into Revit. You know, they're AutoCAD users, and we get more and more questions about Revit and what can we do with Revit. And Revit has all that same parametric capability, right?
Right.
Very, very deep capability, but nothing pre-built for residential or very little. So instead of Argos, which has all that, it ships with it, right? Uh, if you go down the Revit road, you got to build all that stuff and create your own library. There's a few third parties out there. Manufacturers are putting stuff up in Revit. SketchUp's another one. SketchUp has evolved now into a bona fide BIM kind of a package. And
Mhm.
you can do all the same stuff with that if you're willing to expend the energy and the resources and time and money to do it. You can do it, but it's just I just find that these projects with builders, the typical builder I've worked with over the years, it's very hard to get them to see anything through. It really takes strong leadership at the top, somebody determined, like Bob was at Wayne Homes, right?
Yeah,
You got,
exactly.
yeah, we're going to do this by God, and that's the way it's going to be.
They had a team of CAD users there.
Right. But the typical builder, they expect, quite honestly, they expect the technology to be magic, and
Yeah.
they don't realize how much work there is involved. To get to the point where it's really automated and where you can really trust the output and where you're getting the output you want and all that. it takes a lot of man hours to get there,
Yep.
right? And a lot of iterations, and a lot of dedication and a lot of focus. And if you can do that, and we work with some builders that have done that, and they're successful at it, but they're in the minority. Usually you get an installation that limps along. They're getting half of what they could get out of it. Uh, on the ERP side, I mean, how many builders? And I don't mean the nationals. I mean companies like we SMA deal with the 100 to, well, let's say the 50 to 250 home unit builders, and it even
Right.
goes a little wider than that. Now we've got a lot of companies that are on your lot that are their budgets for the year in the 20s, low 30s. You know, but we also have a few companies that are building 500 a year. But how many of those can you really say, okay, are getting all their committed costs on purchase orders every time, right? It's a small percentage, even though we preach it and preach it and preach it. We're working with a company right now in the Carolinas. They're trying to get their purchasing system set up, and they're doing, I don't know, 150, 200 homes a year on your lot, and they're still estimating every one as a one-off, as if it was a custom home.
Oh yeah. Wow.
And we see that all the time. I've had a couple of gigs over the last year and a half where working with an estimating department, the purchasing department. We have a guy, Jason French, who works with us, who that's all he does. Uh, but you know what? When that department, and this has happened several times, the department finds out how much work they're going to have to put in to get over the hump. They quit. They don't stay. They don't stay there long enough to get the project through. So we end up with the second and third purchasing manager, a director of estimating, in a year's time, and the thing just never, it just never gets any traction and gets done. So, but you know, I don't want to say blame, but you have to look to the top. If you don't have leadership at the top
Right.
directing it, it's just not going to happen. So,
No, that's for sure. No, the builder has to be totally immersed and committed, and
yeah, and
everybody has to see that.
so there was a guy, I can't think of his name, Bob could tell you, but the guy that did our keynote at our SMA conference this year, uh, I think his last name is Newell, Newell, something like that. I'll get it for you. But anyway, he's been working with AI for over 20 years. I mean, going back to the beginnings. And he has a very kind of stark statistics that he threw out. And mainly, as we look at the march of technology and builders, either getting with the program or not, what happens is you just get more and more consolidations to the point where there will be no small volume builders. And the trend line looks like this, right? Where bigger and bigger companies are doing more and more starts exponentially, and smaller companies, as a percentage of the total, are doing less and less and less. And it's those big companies that are going to adopt and probably develop the technology. Be looking at a long shot here, right? But I would be more apt to think that Tesla, right, or Toyota, or somebody like that, uh, they're the ones that are going to disrupt the industry. It's not going to be, uh, and like I say, this is a prediction, maybe completely out of left field. It's not going to be D.R. Horton.
That's what I was just thinking.
Yeah, it's not going to be D.R. Horton. It's going to be someone else from out of industry that's going to come in. And one thing I know for sure, I know this for a fact. There are hundreds or probably thousands of extremely smart people thinking about this for our industry, right? That we never see. They don't participate in NAHB. They don't come to HBA meetings. They're not in the industry. They're thinking about the industry from the outside. And there's a lot of them in little think tanks, all over the country and at places like Tesla, right? Or like Toyota or like whoever, who knows, right? But one of these days, some of those things are going to show up and they're already starting to. I mean, you're seeing stuff, and I'm not saying that this is the answer, but things like 3D printed homes, right? Who would have thought that could have been a thing, right? 3D printing a home. Now that may not never get any real traction. I don't know, but it's something that's completely out of every you know out of everybody's mindset at this point. No one's thinking along the lines. We're still out there nailing sticks together, right? We're
Right.
nailing sticks
Yeah.
together, and we're facing a housing crisis. Nobody can afford housing. I was looking at a website, Chuck, the other night. I forget the name of the company, Restake, something like that. They're bragging about they call them micro modular plants that they set up, here, there, whatever. And they've got this line of houses that they prefab, basically modular homes, right?
Hmm.
Affordable housing, yeah, at $3,000 a square foot.
Whoa.
They're not affordable housing, right? Uh,
I better see a
that's
lot of gold-plated walls or something at
Yeah,
that
yeah,
price.
the companies that are from inside the industry thinking about it like that, they're not the ones that are going to get the job done, in terms of transforming
Yeah.
the housing industry or driving technology at a higher level. Uh, and it will be technology driven eventually. It's got to be. Every other industry on the planet is, right?
Right. Well, Joe, it's been great talking to you. Wow, what a neat conversation. Covered a lot of area.
Yeah. Well, that's human consciousness. But any questions or anything, Chuck, just get a hold of me. Hope that you could use some of that in your writing that you're doing. And
Yeah, and if you know anybody else who might be interested in being part of the history of home building software,
what about the Savage? Craig Savage.
yeah, why don't
He
you email me some information there. I appreciate it.
All right, well, he's a good guy, and man, he was one of the big thinkers. That guy he still is. I mean, he's still alive, but he's pretty much retired.
Perfect.
Uh,
We'll get him on the podcast.
yeah. All right.
All right, Joe.
Okay. Sounds good, Chuck. Thank you.
All right, take it easy.
Bye.